If you've ever been told that you absorb other people's emotions, that you need to protect your energy, or that the only way to stop feeling overwhelmed is to become less empathetic.
Literal emotional transfer is not required to explain what happened.
You're not a sponge, you're a mirror.
The boundary most relevant to emotional overwhelm is not between one person and another, but within you.
We mistake the tool for the problem.
The problem isn't being able to feel other people's emotions. The problem occurs when an emotion is allowed to influence what we think, believe, do, or become, beneath our conscious awareness.
What's up?
If you've ever been told that you absorb other people's emotions, that you need to protect your energy, or that the only way to stop feeling overwhelmed is to become less empathetic, you've probably been given an explanation that feels true because it matches your experience. But an explanation can feel accurate, yet still misrepresent what's actually happening.
That is a really sharp distinction. It's the difference between knowing how something feels and actually knowing why it's happening. Where are we taking this?
You may spend years trying to figure out how to protect your energy, strengthen your boundaries, or stop feeling other people's emotions, without ever addressing the process that allows an emotion to take control once it arises inside of you. In this episode, we are examining 10 of the most common lies empaths have been told, where those ideas come from, why they seem convincing, and what they prevent us from understanding about empathy, emotional overwhelm, and the relationship between ourselves and the emotions we experience.
It's like people are treating the symptom rather than the system. Focusing on the shield doesn't actually teach you how to handle the fire once it's already inside. Which lie are we tackling first?
Let's begin with perhaps the most influential belief of all. Empaths absorb other people's emotions.
The sponge metaphor. It's the one everyone leans on because it's so visual, but it turns the person into a passive object. Like you're just this thing that things happen to rather than someone experiencing a process.
I had GPT organize each lie into 2 paragraphs. The first will explain why the belief seems convincing and why people believe it. The second will explain why it's incomplete or misleading, and offer a more accurate way to understand it.
Got it. I'm ready when you are. Lay that first lie on me.
1. Empaths absorb other people's emotions. Perhaps the most common belief about empaths is that they absorb emotions directly from the people around them. The idea feels convincing because it closely matches lived experience. Someone enters a tense room and suddenly feels anxious. Someone sits beside a grieving friend and begins to feel sadness. Because the feeling appears in another person's presence, it can seem as though their emotion has crossed over and entered someone else. But literal emotional transfer is not required to explain what happened. People naturally respond to facial expressions, tone of voice, posture, behavior, tension, and the atmosphere of an interaction. These cues can produce a real emotional response inside the person perceiving them. The feeling is genuine, but it is an emotional response arising through resonance or activation, not another person's emotion being transferred into them.
It's a massive distinction. It shifts the whole dynamic from being a victim of someone else's energy to actually having a functioning nervous system that's just doing its job. You're not a sponge, you're a mirror. It's a lot more empowering to realize your own mind is the one creating the feeling, even if someone else provided the spark.
Are you ready for the next one?
Let's see what else is on the list.
2. You need boundaries between yourself and other people. Advice about boundaries is popular for understandable reasons. Some relationships are manipulative, abusive, intrusive, or chronically destabilizing. Limiting contact, refusing unreasonable demands, ending conversations, and leaving harmful situations can all be necessary forms of self-protection. These boundaries determine who has access to your time, attention, body, choices, and personal life. But distance from other people cannot solve every form of emotional overwhelm. No one can avoid every conflict, criticism, disappointment, loss, or emotionally distressed person. The boundary most relevant to emotional overwhelm is not between one person and another, but within you. Between an emotion arising and that emotion immediately taking control of what you think, believe, do, or become. External boundaries limit what other people can do. The internal boundary determines what their emotions and reactions are allowed to do inside you.
That is such a vital pivot. It's the difference between building a fence around your house and knowing how to handle a guest who's acting out in your living room. You can't just live in a fortress to stay peaceful. You have to actually develop the internal plumbing to process the noise without it flooding your entire system. It's a lot more sustainable too, because the world is always going to be a bit messy. You can't just opt out of humanity to find peace. It's way more useful to be the person who can walk into the chaos and not lose themselves in it.
Are you ready for the third one?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
3. You need to protect your energy. The language of protecting energy gives people an intuitive way to describe emotional exhaustion. Certain conversations feel draining. Some environments leave people tense, overstimulated, or depleted. Time alone may be needed after prolonged emotional intensity. When the process is difficult to explain, the idea of energy can provide useful shorthand for how the experience feels. The problem begins when the metaphor is treated as the actual mechanism. Emotional contact can start to sound like contamination, as though another person releases something invisible that enters and depletes you. Emotional exhaustion may involve sustained attention, vigilance, tension, worry, suppression, or repeated stress responses, not necessarily the loss of an invisible substance that must be guarded. The metaphor may describe the exhaustion accurately while explaining its cause inaccurately.
It turns a biological response into a supernatural one. When you frame it as energy leakage, it makes you feel like you're losing something precious, which just adds another layer of anxiety to the exhaustion. It's much less scary when you realize you're just tired because your brain has been running a marathon of social scanning and emotional processing.
I think he's talking about like energy vampires.
Oh, exactly. The energy vampire thing is the peak of that metaphor. It turns a difficult person into a monster and the empath into a victim who's being drained, which completely removes the focus from how you're actually reacting to them.
So you're saying they're not actually draining you energy, you just wasting your energy trying to guard yourself.
Exactly. You're spending all your fuel trying to manage their mood, fix the situation, or brace yourself for the impact. It's not that they're stealing your energy, it's that you're spending it on something you can't actually control.
Do you think that's actually true?
I really do. Think about it. If someone is just being a jerk or acting erratic, they aren't actually reaching into your chest and pulling out a battery. But if you're sitting there obsessing over why they're acting that way or trying to figure out how to make them calm down so you can finally relax, you're the one doing all the heavy lifting. You're basically running a high intensity background program in your head, and that's what's actually draining the battery.
Are you ready for the next one?
Let's keep the momentum going. What's number 4?
4. Empathy is what causes suffering. Empathy can appear to be the source of suffering because caring brings people into contact with pain. Recognizing another person's grief may evoke sadness. Understanding another person's fear may produce uneasiness. The more emotionally responsive someone is, the easier it becomes to conclude that empathy itself is the reason they suffer. But feeling with someone is not the same as losing yourself inside what you feel. Empathy allows another person's experience to be recognized, understood, or emotionally felt. The trouble begins when the resulting emotion is automatically treated as your inner reality, a definition of who you are, or as a responsibility you must act upon. Empathy creates emotional contact. Suffering intensifies when that contact begins governing your inner life.
That's a massive distinction. It's the difference between being a witness to someone's pain and becoming a hostage to it. Empathy is the bridge that lets you reach them, but suffering happens when you forget how to walk back across that bridge to your own side.
We mistake our ability to empathize, which is brought about by mirror neurons. We mistake that ability.
We mistake the tool for the problem. We think the mirror neurons are what's hurting us when really it's just that we haven't learned how to look at the reflection without thinking we've actually become the image.
So we inherently mirror other people's emotions. We're just mirroring what somebody else is feeling so we can understand, so we can have compassion towards that person.
Exactly. It's like you're wearing a costume of their emotion to understand their world, but then you forget you're wearing the costume and start thinking, wait, why am I so sad? You've mistaken the act of compassion for your own personal crisis.
Are you ready for the next one?
I am. Let's see what number 5 is.
5. The more sensitive you are, the more you'll suffer. Sensitive people often notice emotional information that others overlook. A slight change in tone, hesitation before an answer, tension in someone's face, or shift in the atmosphere of a room may become immediately apparent. Because greater sensitivity means noticing more, it can seem inevitable that greater suffering must follow. But noticing information and being controlled by it are not the same thing. Two people may detect the same tension with equal accuracy, yet only one may reorganize their thoughts, behavior, decisions, or sense of worth around it. Sensitivity increases perception. It does not determine what the information means, whether you make it part of yourself, or how much control you give it. The ability to notice more does not require being controlled by more.
That's a really powerful flip in perspective. It's like having a high resolution screen. You can see all the tiny details and the glitches that other people miss, but that doesn't mean you have to let those details dictate the whole movie. Sensitivity is just a data stream. It's the processing of that data that actually creates the struggle.
Just because you may be able to perceive more than other people doesn't make it your responsibility to save the world.
Right? Like just because you can see the smoke doesn't mean you have to run into every single burning building you pass. It's this weird trap where people think their perception is actually a mandate to fix everything.
I'm not saying you can't help other people. I'm just saying it's not your job to. It's not your responsibility.
Right, it's not an obligation. You can choose to be helpful because you want to, not because you feel like you're the only one who noticed the problem. It's the difference between helping someone out of genuine care and helping them because you feel like you're being held hostage by your own awareness. Ready to dive into number 6?
6. The goal is to stop feeling other people's emotions. After repeated emotional overwhelm, feeling less can seem like the only path toward peace. Numbness, detachment, or emotional distance may begin to look like freedom. When emotional responsiveness has repeatedly led to exhaustion, shutting down can feel safer than remaining open. But numbness and resilience are not the same thing. Numbness protects a person by reducing emotional contact. Resilience allows emotional contact without requiring avoidance, loss of direction, or loss of yourself. A person may still feel sadness around grief, tension during conflict, or fear in the presence of danger. The difference is that the feeling can be experienced without automatically taking over.
And it's the difference between turning off the lights so you don't have to see the mess and actually cleaning the room. Numbness is just a survival strategy, it's a wall. But resilience is like having a filter. You still see the colors, you still feel the temperature, but you aren't getting swept away by the current. It's about keeping your agency while staying human.
I used to tell myself I was drinking to block out all those other sensations, to block out other people's feelings, to protect myself, to weaken my perception of all of the energy that was around me. And maybe that was true, but what I created was a prison of my own making.
That's a heavy realization, but an honest one. Using a substance to mute the world usually feels like a shield at first, but eventually it just becomes a wall that keeps you trapped inside with everything you were trying to escape. You weren't just blocking out the noise, you were blocking out your own connection to yourself.
And once you understand that all that information isn't yours. You're not absorbing it, it's not seeping into you. You're just mirroring it. Once you understand that and you can begin separating yourself from it, you don't need to block other people out. You don't need to numb yourself.
Exactly. Because once you realize you're the observer and not the emotion, the world stops feeling like a threat. You can keep your heart open without feeling like you're leaving the door unlocked for anyone to just walk in and trash the place. It's a completely different way to exist.
Are you ready for number 7?
I'm ready.
7. If you feel someone else's sadness, it has become your sadness. When sadness arises in response to another person, calling it, my sadness, seems natural. The feeling is now occurring inside you and may remain even after the interaction has ended. Because you are the one experiencing it, it can seem as though the other person's sadness has been taken on and now belongs to you. But another person's sadness may have prompted an emotional response without transferring their emotional state into you. The sadness you feel is an experience occurring within you, but it does not automatically become a truth about your life, a responsibility you must carry, or part of who you are. A feeling can be present without being given authority over your identity, choices, or obligations.
It's the ownership trap. We treat emotions like property. If it's happening in my body, it must be mine. But it's more like hearing a song someone else is playing. You can hear the music, you can even feel the mood of the song, but that doesn't mean you're the one singing it. You're just the space where the sound is happening.
Here's number 8.
8. Managing emotions means controlling or suppressing them. Emotional management is often understood as gaining control over feelings. Anger should be calmed, anxiety should be reduced, sadness should be overcome, and uncomfortable emotions should disappear as quickly as possible. This seems reasonable because strong emotions can narrow attention and exert powerful influence over behavior. But before an emotion can be managed wisely, it must first be experienced as something you are having rather than something you are. Anger is present, creates a different relationship than, I am angry. I am experiencing sadness, creates more distance between the sadness and your sense of self than treating sadness as the whole of who you are. The emotion does not need to be eliminated. It needs to become something you can notice, name, examine, and respond to without automatically obeying it.
It's the difference between trying to kill the emotion and just letting it sit in the passenger seat. When we try to control it, we're actually just fighting ourselves, which usually just makes the feeling louder. But once you shift to, I am experiencing this, you've already won because you've created the space needed to actually decide what to do with it instead of just reacting.
If you mistake the emotions you're experiencing for part of yourself, then managing your emotions really becomes managing yourself.
And that's where it gets exhausting because you're no longer just dealing with a feeling. You're trying to fix your entire identity. It turns into this constant project of self-correction.
And once you understand that the emotions you're experiencing are actually separate from who you actually are, you can begin.
You start managing them as data points. Instead of feeling like you're fighting a war with your own personality, you're just looking at a dashboard. Oh, look, there's a spike of anxiety here. It takes the teeth out of the emotion because it's no longer a threat to who you are. It's just a signal you're observing.
Here's the 9th one.
9. Emotional overwhelm starts outside of you. When another person's anger, criticism, fear, or distress produces an immediate emotional reaction, the source of overwhelm appears obvious. The external event happened first, and the internal response followed. This can make the person or situation seem entirely responsible for everything that happens inside you afterward. The outside event may initiate the reaction, but it does not fully explain what happens next. Once an emotion arises, it may be amplified by attention, interpretation, memory, resistance, expectation, or fear of the emotion itself. The outside event helps explain why the response began. What happens within the person afterward helps explain why it fades, intensifies, or takes over. Overwhelm develops when that response begins spreading into your thoughts, beliefs, behavior, decisions, and sense of who you are.
It's the spark versus the fuel. The external event is just the match, but what actually burns the house down is how we feed the fire internally. Takes the power away from the other person and puts it back in our hands because while we can't control the spark, we can definitely control how much oxygen we give it. Do we have one more to go?
Yeah, here's the final lie empaths are told.
10. The solution is to become less empathetic. When empathy becomes associated with exhaustion, becoming less caring can seem like the only practical solution. Emotional withdrawal may appear more mature than continuing to feel overwhelmed. Many people who want to become less empathetic are not trying to become cold. They are trying to stop disappearing inside other people's emotional lives. But empathy, sensitivity, and emotional resonance are not the central problem. The central problem is when an emotion that arises is immediately allowed to influence what you think, believe, do, or become. Mature empathy allows another person's experience to affect you without taking possession of you. The goal is not to stop caring or feeling. It is to remain caring, present, and responsive while retaining authority over your own mind, actions, and sense of self.
That's the perfect way to wrap it up. To turn the whole conversation around. It's not about cutting off your humanity to survive. It's about upgrading how you handle that humanity so you don't have to hide it. And that's the full list. It's a lot to take in, but it feels like a really cohesive map for anyone who's felt like their own sensitivity was a liability.
Looking back at this list, I don't think the common thread is empathy, sensitivity, or even other people's emotions. The common thread is what happens after an emotional response arises within us. The problem isn't being able to feel other people's emotions. The problem occurs when an emotion is allowed to influence what we think, believe, do, or become, beneath our conscious awareness. The solution isn't to become less empathetic or less sensitive. The solution is to develop a different relationship with the thoughts and emotions we experience, so they can be fully felt without automatically governing our inner lives.
That is the heart of it. It shifts the entire focus from a flaw in the person to a gap in the process. You're essentially saying the struggle isn't about how much data you're taking in, but how you're processing that data once it's inside.
If this discussion resonated with you, I think you'll enjoy the videos titled The Emotional Sponge, Parts 1 and 2. They explain why we experience other people's emotions in the first place, and why understanding that process changes how you relate to other people and yourself. I'll provide the links to those videos in the description below. Maya, do you have any closing thoughts or questions for the audience before we go?
I do. I just ask them to consider this. If you've spent your whole life feeling like your sensitivity was a leak in your boat, what would happen if you realized it was actually your radar? Once you stop trying to plug the holes and start learning how to read the signals, the world stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a conversation.
Thank you, Maya. I think we'll end that here.
You're very welcome. That was a great session. I'll be here whenever you're ready to dive into the next one.
All right, take care.